Hey, welcome to another episode of Security and GRC Decoded. I'm your favorite host, Raj Krishnamurthy. And today we have sort of a person with a very practical approach to security and GRC today, Kenneth Moras. Kenneth Moras is the head of security of GRC at Plaid. He has more than 15 years of experience with security and GRC. I would say Kenneth actually grew up the ranks the hard way, right? From a web developer to a pen tester to becoming a leader and building GRC and assurance teams. I think we would love to hear from you, Kenneth, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Raj. First of all, thank you for hosting this beautiful show. I've seen a lot of different presenters talking on really intellectual things. Thanks for hosting this, and thank you for calling me on this program. Okay, yeah, quick introduction to everyone. My name is Kenneth. I've been, as Raj said, I've been in the security space for 15 years. I started as a web developer. Um, I think so. I was doing fairly well, but I hated fixing bugs middle of the night and slowly realized this may not be my cup of tea for a long period of time. But I did enjoy talking to a lot of people, hearing their interesting views, and I at that point of time when I joined KPMG in the consulting world in the cybersecurity consulting space. Throughout that time, did bunch of different roles: IT audits, pen testing, vendor management. uh, Try to flex my muscle in different areas, but I was primarily hired to do software dev even over there. But I think so, just because the nature of consulting, the needs of your customers, I was able to flex my muscle, and these opportunities helped me think through cybersecurity from a wide lens, technology risks, pen testing. But again, like that is a one small facet of technology risks. Got to learn a lot about how customers deploy products, systems, how misconfigurations can create havoc. So it was a really great opportunity. But over a period of time, moved to Adobe to help them set up their cloud security practice. And also at that point of time, I was involved in building trust with their enterprise customers like Disney's, etc. They had really high bar in protecting their IP. So at that point of time, I really learned that having great security is one small piece of the puzzle. If your story, if your hard work, if your strategy is not does not resonate well with your intended stakeholders, you have lost half the battle. And at that point of time, I really enjoyed working with external stakeholders. And at that point of time, I realized that yes, GRC is potentially the area I want to specialize in and create my expertise. Got the similar opportunity at Meta, helping them scale their enterprise products. It was Oculus, hardware, WhatsApp, their ads business. They had a Slack-based competitor at that point of times. It was quite interesting because it is every stakeholder based on the type of products. A hardware product have a different risk profile. A SaaS-based product has a different risk profile, and it was really interesting to flex my security risk mindset and help the business work with different security SMEs in helping reduce the risk and at the same time articulating our story externally correctly. And I was quite fortunate to work in at Plaid. So Plaid is building very interesting products to empower financial freedom for everyone. Uh, at that point of time, Plaid was really exploding in terms of new products and new geos, and our use cases in how Plaid was being used by more than 10,000 plus customers was quite very interesting. And that opportunity seemed right to me because I really wanted to be in a organization that is actually trying to build something that is benefiting consumers in different facets of their life, and their mission, the problem statement really resonated with me, and that's how I started being one of the first hires, building the GRC team bottoms to tops, like from scratch, as you say. All these different experiences from like technology, risk management, compliance audits, talking to regulators, finally all of this mashed together, which ultimately helped me get the role that I enjoyed, and that's how I am at Plaid in a nutshell.
No, I actually, but that's a beautiful story, Kenneth, and I loved the way you put it. I think what you're basically saying is, in order to create a better security, right? The end just doesn't matter. The means to the end matters. If you do all the right things, And security and definitely GRC is a consequential outcome, right? But you have to do all the right things. Now I think that's a beautiful perspective. You also actively participate in open source, right? Were you part of the open CCF effort at
Yes.
Adobe?
Yes. So I was part of the Adobe Common Control Framework design and implementation of it. A quick story, a very quick snapshot of that story was Adobe was acquiring a lot of companies. Adobe by itself is a giant beast, right? They have the creative products, they have their marketing products, analytic products, they have their document signing products, and all of not all of these products acquisitions came with a very similar tech stack, similar people, processes, kind of technology. They were so in order for us to build a scalable compliance program, build a scalable security program, most importantly, standardization was required. How we talked about security controls, what are our capabilities, what is how do we measure maturity in our program? We needed to talk in a simple language, one, and b, that simple language should translate into multiple different frameworks, multiple different expectations by regulators. So what we decided was just go to the drawing board. At the end of the day, all of these different regulations, standards are expecting you to do core fundamental things, and we just made sure like we articulated those, documented those in a way that makes sense for Adobe, and we did some internal rationalization on how these practices actually map to different standards, and we just use this approach to talk to internal stakeholders, talk to the organizations that we acquired and help them build this fundamental capability. And soon we realized that standardization of controls, standardization of technology stack, and audit once and get multiple certification was high ROI work. And that's when we double, triple down our effort, and we realized that, hey, this is not just useful for Adobe, it could be useful for organizations beyond. And that's when we decided to open source this, and it's really awesome to see like different GRC tools, different organizations have built on top of this concept. Like it's not a radical, earth-shattering concept, but it is super important. Sometimes we need to reduce complexity, and when you reduce complexity and you articulate things in a straightforward, simple manner, and you can tell that story in a very clear manner, things become easier, right? And that's why CCF have got popularity, and I was fortunate enough to be in the initial design phase of this program.
No, absolutely. And I think I actually call this, pardon and no pun intended, the
Yeah.
Adobe Mafia, because Adobe has created some of the most phenomenal security and GRC engineers out there, right, in many, many different companies. And some of them have been our guests as well. And you're also a co author of OFDSS.
Yes.
Talk to our
So
listeners about what OFDSS does. What is OFDSS? What do you do there?
hmm. So we need to step back a bit to understand the origins of OFDSS. So OFDSS in simple terms, Open Finance Data Security Standard. Think of it as you had PCI. PCI was created very specifically to protect payment information, but open finance as a concept is really exploding in United States. Like you have a lot of fintechs, like the big brands like Venmos, Robin Hoods, like you already heard about it. But there are so many innovative fintechs that are building innovative experiences, like ability to build a great financial portfolio of yourself with just $1 subscription a month. Like there are a lot of very interesting use cases built by Plaid customers. And Plaid being in the center of the ecosystem where we are responsible to share consumer permission data to different fintech developers, we felt it was pretty important that we don't randomly onboard any fintech developers to build products and create challenges for consumers like you and me, right? So we really thought that with the boom of cloud technology and how security controls are built in a cloud native environment, just not telling do this, how can you do this? Like for a modern organization that is just bootstrapping on top of AWS, there are different ways in how we can meet the intended objective. So we thought, like, by writing it down, again, taking the experience from Adobe CCF, simplifying things, right? Okay, you are an organization, you have X data, you have Y data. These are the use cases and how you work with Plaid. If you implement these fundamental capabilities, and this is how you could potentially build, you will organically build a more secure product and secure infrastructure. And we wanted to double down on it, because sometimes just telling your customers, okay, go and follow this CSF, follow A, follow B, follow this blog, right? It just becomes a little difficult. Like, you don't want to make your developers scared in adopting security. So we just took a approach that, hey, let's just understand all of this best practices that out there, understand the different scale, right? Like a startup with 5 people may not have the bandwidth, may not have the funding to match the security investments what Microsoft or a Google would do. So we needed to calibrate it and present it to this unique set of people that, if you're building on top of our platform, we expect you to have a certain bar. And that concept led us to build OFDSS. And it really helps our customers understand how they could implement these practices when they're just starting to scale their products along with
Got
Plaid.
it. And does OFDSS, does it do the harmonization like OpenCCF does, where or the Cisco CCF, where you're correlating that with other frameworks and authority documents?
Yeah, but we have to a small extent. That was not our primary objective. Like,
Objective.
our objective was not to help our customers harmonize per se, but help them implement some of the basic tenets of security controls and how they can implement. So we didn't take a compliance lens, like, hey, if you do this, you're going to get ISO 27001 SOC 2. That was not the intention and why we essentially built it. We just wanted them to have a easy framework to digest these concepts and implement it, so that they can actually do security real well. And if they do that, security certifications will become a byproduct. And if they really, as and when they grow their company, as and when they have to demonstrate external assurance, they can definitely use something like Cisco CCF, Adobe CCF, or anything that exists in the market. But because ultimately, if you have the fundamental capabilities, if you have the if you have built your product and infrastructure ground up in a right way, your ability your likelihood of complying with this industry best practices becomes
Got it. I'm
better.
with
So
you.
that was a little bit shift in how we thought about this.
Got
And
it. Something
again,
like Cyber Essentials, the Cyber
yes,
Essential framework.
some a similar concept, but with more targeted guidance, not just a thou shalt do that and
Got it.
and you figure it out, right?
I think you've spoken truly like an engineer. No, I agree. What is the level of adoption for OFDSS, especially among fintech and financial and banking services companies?
Yeah, so I think it's primarily our customers, and we like to we also want to make sure that if they're not directly adopting as well, we can periodically do a diligence on them periodically based on risk signals, and indirectly enforce those best practices. So it's a dual strategy. It's not just like, hey, give this document and and figure out, like, over a period of time, if these customers are ramping up meaningful traffic, they're consuming meaningful data, then we'll use the similar framework constructs to review our customers and help them adopt this standard and elevate their practices.
Got it. Now, I think when you said this earlier, and I think even in an earlier conversation when we spoke, you said cyber security is beyond technology risk management. What did you mean
Yes.
by that, Kenneth?
So I think so. Mostly people think that cybersecurity is just a concept where you harden your systems, you harden your laptops, infrastructure, right? That is a very important aspect. There is a technology component. There's a human aspect of it. Like, how do you interact with that data? What is the responsible way in interacting with the data? There is a lot of people, processes, and technology, right? Like, you will always see this triad. So I don't know whether it's called a triad. Yeah, there is a CIA triad and there is a PPT triad, like people, process, technology. There needs to be a sweet spot of all three things converging in a way to meet the intended cybersecurity outcomes. Um, what could be a good example? I'm just trying to think through this. Yeah, not a great example. Let's assume that you build a perfect process where employees automatically get offboarded within X amount of time, and you have great integration between Octas, you have integration between Workday. But again, you need people to think through, like, are all the right systems scoped in? Like, has Okta been actually integrated with all the systems? So the people and processes need to exist to make sure, first of all of these things do take place, like the scope, the breadth is actually in place. And for example, like, even if these controls work, right, and if managers are not even submitting your end date within Workday,
Exactly.
things
Yeah.
are not going to work. So I'm intentionally choosing this simple example because as a GRC professional, like, you can think that I want to be an expert at technology at risk, but in reality, humans are involved. Humans do mistakes. Humans do need context. So when you're building a great GRC program, you have to think through the entire life cycle in how the technology control does work. How do you make sure these processes support these technology controls, and as a result, you need to really go to the drawing board, and GRC is more like a strategy advisory kind of role rather than a traditional audit lens, right? Like, you do have internal audit functions where the whole objective of internal audit, like, nothing against internal audit professionals, right? It's a very important profession by itself, right? But they have a very specific goal. Like, you have come up with very specific objectives, and you have said that you do A, B, C. Do you do A, B, C? Right? They need to validate it with a very precise, defined lens. But GRC needs to operate a little bit differently. Like, we are the ones who are going to work closely with our security counterparts, engineering counterparts, and how the control will either prevent, detect, reduce, monitor, measure. There might be thousands of different variations of these terms, but ultimately, we need to, whatever we do, is to get our risks under control that is manageable to our appetite. And if you do that really well, compliance can become a byproduct by itself, right? Like, so GRC is quite an interesting field. I would say you need to be jack of all trades, but at the same time, you need to have pockets of depths, and it becomes very hard. Not every team member within a GRC org can be expert at everything. So at that point of time, the GRC leadership's strategy in building the right people with the breadth, depth,
Absolutely.
skills, people skills, business skills becomes so important. And that is something I enjoy a lot because I've hired people directly from business schools with zero cybersecurity context. I've hired people with pure data analytics backgrounds. I've hired people with uh, hardcore engineering skills, software engineering, right? So for me, it is the collective team that helps meet the business objective, right? I can't expect every person to be master at everything. So that's what GRC appeals to me. Like, I am, as a person, I get bored really fast. So, like, an example for, like, I picked one musical instrument, I learned it. Okay, I can pretty much play any song just by hearing the tune. Let me pick up the next instrument. So I keep on. For me, change is very important. That keeps me motivated, that keeps my mind sharp. Not everybody enjoys context switching. I enjoy context switching. So GRC is a very different field on its own. Like, you need to have a great personality fit, you need to have curiosity, because what can go wrong? So building a GRC team requires you to really pick and choose the right personality fit, the right persona, the right skill, and that's what I enjoy, because you're building like even like in a sport, right? Like there are people with different skills. Cricket, you are an expert bowler, you are a batsman, you're a wicket keeper. Like you have, when you get all of your different key skill set people in the right place, only then your team wins. And similarly, is similar concept is with GRC as well. So I give a very long-winded answer to this whole question that you asked. So ultimately, where am I going at is, you can't look GRC only as a pure technology problem. And I know GRC engineering is a term that is really catching buzzwords, etc. Right? Uh, that is needed. It is a very critical component of GRC, but it is not like GRC engineering by itself is not GRC.
I'm with you. I'm with you. So what I'm hearing you say is that if I have generalist on one side, the sales guys, the people who work in HR, right, who have generalist set of skills, and then you have specialists on the other side, like people who work as engineers, right, Rust engineers, Go engineers, and they can go down the level of specialization, security engineers, architects. You are
Yes.
saying GRC is max right in the middle, what I would call maybe generalized specialists,
Yes.
right, where you have to be general enough, but you have to have, so the breadth becomes your depth. In this case, you have to be
Yes.
broad, but you have to be deep enough to be able to work with both the specialist and the generalist.
Yes. Yes. Like what fascinates GRC, like why I enjoy GRC a lot is, it is hard. Like of course, like every job, if you do it really well, uh the complexities keep on increasing. But with GRC, the biggest complexity is just the breadth. Like you need to understand infrastructure, you need to understand your product strategy, you need to understand your go to market strategy, you need to
Exactly.
be like, you need to connect the dots really well. And finally, at the end of the day, when you are talking about technology risks or risks in general, those are what you internally perceive. There are risks which external stakeholders are worried about, and you need to normalize all of this information. Your regulators are worried about something, your customers are worried about something, your partners are worried about something, your internal engineering is worried about something. And so how do you normalize all of this information, stack rank this information, use data driven, use good signals on what is happening in the world, like what are the attacks that you see in the world. So you need to normalize different information, work closely with your security leadership like your CISOs and other security leaders, and help stack rank your yearly OKRs or like quarterly OKRs, right? It has to be risk driven. Like these are the key risks, and these are the security initiatives that are going to bring down this risk. So that's why the security GRC profession needs to work so much in hand with other facets of cybersecurity, whether it's corporate, platform, ProdSec, what the different variations or different facets of cybersecurity. We need to be in fine tune with these different teams within cybersecurity so that we can really understand why we should be investing in, or essentially focusing on reducing certain technology risks and build it into our yearly roadmap. That's the reason all of these expectations, like your advisory, being up to speed on different things that are happening inside the organization, outside the organization, makes this role quite challenging.
Got it. I want to double click on this. What is your view of G, R, and C? Do you see them as distinct functions? How do you see them vis-a-vis security?
Hmm. So I have two young kids, so I'm trying to see if I can make an analogy with that, right? So like just with my, like for example, my kids play with toys, so I need to give them certain rules of the game, method to the madness, right? They cannot just throw their toys anywhere and create havoc, right? There has to be certain direction or directive things that say that, okay, once you're done, keep your toys somewhere in one place. So essentially governance is method to the madness. You just cannot run your security program or your security strategy randomly. So you need to be able to articulate, document them, and govern them. So I would say, uh, just give me a second, my laptop is not charging. Okay, I don't know why. Okay, I'm good. So what I'm trying to say is, like, governance is essentially understanding what are the what are the rules of the game,
What
right?
are the
And that
guiding principles?
guiding principles, like, and you can't just do eeny miny more, like, hey, I see this says that, let me add it into my policy, right? It has to be very thoughtful. And so that's why governance is important. I don't see a lot of organizations really critically thinking about governance. Governance by itself is a very hard problem, distinct problem. Risk, like, if while my children play, and if there are some small pieces within the toys, and if they swallow it, right, it is a health hazard. So you need to look at every situation, what can go wrong. And similarly, you need to have a very different mindset for risk. Like, you need to have a lot of curious mindset, what can go wrong. You need to have depth, or if you don't have depth, you need to prompt well, right? In the AI world, right, you need to ask the right questions. Whether it was a AI world or non-AI world, you have to have those very specific, keen, curious mindset. How can I bypass this control? If I were an attacker, how would I try to game the system, right? So you need people. So R is a unique skill where you are trying to really bring down what can go wrong, make it in a way that is understood, and ultimately you need to be able to influence, right? Just by saying something is wrong doesn't work. So you need to have an influential hat. So R is, I would say, R is really hard. So you need to be able to identify, quantify, and influence the outcomes. So very distinct skill set. C, I, for example, the rule is toys should pass through safety checks, shouldn't have very small choking parts. So I need the compliance is like, hey, is this toy gone through a certain standardization, certain testing? Can these parts easily come out? And is so basically, I'm just going to validate whatever I wanted to validate. Like, you have a set of things, principles, and you just want to validate those things do take place or not. So all three are interrelated. I wouldn't say they're totally disjointed, but all of them need a very different lens in how you think through it. But if all G, R, and C are not connected, if they're not cohesive enough, yeah, then you will have a problem. You will
Problem.
have a problem. Like, you can't say that I want to be compliant with X, and your policies and directions are just in opposite direction. So there needs to be harmony, there needs to be good synergy. Because if your risk management program keeps on telling you that your change management controls are super weak, and there are like 50 risks coming in the risk register, but your compliance professional says that, like, you're great, like, we're going to pass our ISOs, we're going to pass our SOC 2s, right? So
You are
that means
broke.
something is wrong. This
Yeah.
entire GRC function needs to be in lockstep. They need to work very closely with each other, but they are very independent as well. They have the independent tasks, they have the independent success criterias, uh, and that's what makes GRC interesting, right?
I
There,
love the way you're saying it. I love, so you're essentially, it's a check and balance function, right? Just like you have the judiciary, you have the executive branch, and you have the legislative branch, and I think each of them has to check the other. And I think
yes,
so. Your point
I
is that
agree.
GRC is an independent function, but
Yes,
it also has sub functions that have to be in alignment and in synchronization with each other. That's
yes.
a great point. That's a great.
Just adding, like, didn't mean to interrupt your chain of thoughts. Like, at least when I was in Meta, the org that I was part of, it was itself called as measurement and validation. Like,
Uh-huh.
the name of the organization was called measurement and validation. Like, you have your engineering function that are jumping from problem A to problem B to problem C, right? They are paid to disrupt, they're paid to build features, capabilities that your customers need. And and with that speed, sometimes the core expectation, the core capabilities may regress, right? They may not do it intentionally. There might be wide ranges of factors in why your control regresses. So you need an independent team that has been given the charter, they're given be the headspace to just validate, like, hey, this is a core capability, this is what helps us be mature in these areas, and we need to be able to continuously measure those capabilities. And that's where the GRC engineering is helping disrupt this space, right? How can we use data driven approaches to essentially identify deviations in your controls as soon as possible and take a data driven approach rather than a sample based approach. Like, I'm pretty sure almost everybody in this audience understand the screenshot versus a data driven complete population based testing, right? So I'm not going diving deep into that, but ultimately have everybody like talk pushing evidences using webhooks, ability to centralize all of this information in one place and perform analytics on that data, and taking a detection engineering kind of mindset. Like if
Got it.
something looks so what I'm really excited in the last few years, people, there are companies like Compliance Cow, there are a lot of other companies that who are helping organizations solve that problem. Like the biggest challenge was GRC teams were asked to do a lot. It was not because GRC teams were lazy, they wanted to take the easy route. The problem was they were asked to work on too many things: vendor risk management, be the PR person of security, go and talk to, you have to wear a lot of
Yeah.
hats, I would say. Like, and with that, we you had to cut corners in some place. And traditionally, security engineers, or like engineers, were not generally part of the GRC team, but organizations like you who are helping build this capabilities is super impactful. And I'm really loving the trend, right? Like now people are talking about it. Why is it important to measure things better? And we're building tools, etc., to make it easier. I'm really excited in how this whole GRC function is essentially evolving.
Got it. And
Primarily C, I still feel the R has to evolve a lot. Like
yeah,
the disruption in the risk management space is still up for grabs, but I'm seeing among GRC Cs where, of course, there is a reason why C is picking up more than R, but I still feel there is a huge opportunity for the risk
why do you think
management
C is
space.
picking up more than R?
I'm just thinking, what is a good diplomatic answer over here, right? Like, of course, like nothing to shy over here, right? If you don't have certain certifications, if you
You
don't have
can't sell.
certain seals, you cannot sell. That's the world we live in, right? And of course, a lot of organizations have capitalized on this need, this pain. A lot of startups are building innovative stuff, but they want to be able to get that seal as soon as possible, right?
Got it.
So organizations might have optimized for that, but I really don't care. Like every business has to make money, but I think so fundamentally the direction, the investment that is going in is helping take that programmatic data driven approach. And so the C is really an area where we see startups and organizations putting a lot of money to disrupt, make it faster, more efficient. But R, I still feel is quite legacy.
I hear
And
you. I
yeah,
hear you. And I want to come back and talk about that. But the one question I want to really come back and talk about the R, but the one question I want to ask you is that if you are the product engineer, right, sitting out there, based on what you're saying, you may potentially see the GRC function, the security GRC function, slowing down innovation, because you're basically trying to say slow down, don't go too fast, or if you're going too fast and I'm going to measure you, I'm going to validate you, creates possibly some unintended friction, right? Even if, how do you respond to is do you agree with that view, the GRC slows innovation, and how do you respond to that?
GRC can slow down innovation if you're not doing it right. That is true. That there are a lot of organizations, a lot of compliance professional who just put in requirements without asking like what is the benefit, what is the value, what is the risk reduction. And when you just say that do this with a hammer, yeah, people, like, nobody likes to be bossed around, nobody likes to be told around to do without having an intellectual conversation, right? So yeah, this is happening. It's happened in the past. It will continue to happen in future. But a great GRC team wouldn't operate in that way, right? Like I really feel that, at least I'm fortunate that I have not seen this problem, at least at Plaid, because fundamentally what we do is when we make an ask, we methodically do our assessment as to like what are the downsides of this, and we also look at the upsides of it. Like there are upsides of not doing things, there are downsides of not doing things, so we present both the picture to the best of our ability, get our SMEs understand all of these capabilities, and then have a good intellectual conversation on like why we might slow down a bit for whatever reason if required. Not 9 out of 10 the conversations are not really about slowing down. How can we measure this? Like, hey, you are building this, but I want to measure whether, like for example, MFA rates. Like if we are building certain MFA features within our products and suddenly the rates are dropping, the engineering team cares, the GRC team also cares, right? MFA is a key control for us. So why don't we just say that you care about this thing, I care about this thing? Why don't you build the fundamental data logging pipeline, and I can build the dashboards measurement around it, which you can subscribe to? It's a win-win for both, right? So it is all about framing, right? What is in for you, what is in for me. If there's nothing in for, if the benefits are only for the compliance team, that means there is something wrong.
No,
There has to be
beautifully
a
said.
benefit. There has
I
to be a benefit for the engineering and product team in whatever we are proposing them to do.
got it. I think there has to be a balance of trade. And I think it's a
Yes.
brilliant point that you're making, Kenneth, and you're absolutely right, because the contribution has to be felt on both sides. Now,
Yes.
I want to ask you, building this great GRC team, like you rightly said, right? Can you walk through, maybe I'm putting you on the spot here. So a new app comes into being, right? How would you sort of, at a high level, how do you break down this problem in terms of adding controls to it, right? Evaluating the controls for either compliance or risk, or establishing a governance around it. And how do you bring the engineering teams and the product teams into the fold? Do you have a high level framework by which you can walk our listeners through?
Yeah. It's a long conversation, but ultimately it breaks down into couple of phases. One is the core expectations on how the product should behave, the capabilities or the features that we expect the product to have, the security features. They need to be known. First of all, you need to be able to tell the product manager who's overseeing the entire ideation to execution. They need to be aware of the key expectations that we have, like in terms of logging. I'm not going in depth for this conversation. So first of all, you need to have your baselines and non-ambiguous baselines. Again, thou shall do X, right? You should have very clear expectations that you are not going to spin up this product in a random AWS account without us first, without the security team actually setting up their tooling hardware. Like, so
So
there has
some
to
paved
be
path from a security perspective
paved path,
exists.
correct?
Yep.
So paved path has to exist. One. B, there is the security culture. So the next thing is you need to build a great security culture. This is a very hard problem, but ultimately your employees, your product teams, product engineers should feel empowered that they can ask questions on, like, I really don't know whether this is the best way to deploy this product or implement certain things, right? They need to have a safety net that by asking they're not going to get penalized. So the security review process, the threat modeling process, the whole, again, this seems like this is outside GRC, but the GRC team should be involved in making sure a lot of these pieces do exist within an organization. So what am I essentially trying to say is, like, there has to be a way in where they can get right advice. So advice can come in multiple places, right? If it is a very product and infrastructure related thing, you can have a separate intake process. But if it's a true technology risk where they really don't know to make the trade-off, should we do X or should it be Y, but I'm worried about Z, is Z really a big deal or not? There should be a way they can just express it in very simple words and trust that the team that is getting this request is going to methodically evaluate it. They're going to do their due diligence, they're going to understand it and give them good targeted advice, right? So this only happens by, one, like, you building your own brand. Security team has to build their own brand and they feel comfortable that you are engaging really well. So essentially, step one, paved paths. Step two is essentially ability to make trade-offs very reasonably. And step three, have a very scalable auditing infrastructure, right? Like, we are going to tell them, like, we're not going to ask you these artifacts, evidence, capabilities again and again, right? You tell us upfront, like, how do we measure this? How are you going to measure this? How are you expecting us to measure it? So having this, all these conversations upfront initially might take little time, but over a long period of time, we know exactly how to measure, what to look at. They know where to get advice from. They know what are the expected. So these are three high level pillars. It feels very conceptual right now, like it feels like a fairy tale, but ultimately I really believe in simplicity, right? Like you need to make things simple and clear upfront. The more less ambiguous you are, and the the ability for stakeholders to ask for advice, seek advice, is it takes time to build that culture. It takes time to build that rapport. And ultimately, even your GRC team, by telling them like, hey, the reason why we are asking these questions right now is so that we can measure this at scale over a period of time. Having these logs, having these metrics, having this additional logging parameters, all of this makes everybody's life easier. And that's how we approach, I would say, getting the product or getting a new concept live from ground up in a more easier manner. It all sounds like complex, like you need to jump multiple hoops, but in reality it is not, if you are giving these expectations in a very clearly legible way.
Got it. You worked in tech forward companies, Kenneth. How real is engineers' toil on
It's real.
GRC?
Within GRC.
No, outside of GRC. Doing working with GRC, right? Whether it is evaluating your access controls, whether it is making sure that you're staying within SLA, right? The managers reviewing it, the product engineers working on it. How much time do these teams spend on GRC, and what should be the role of the GRC function in reducing that friction?
Mm. So toil is real. I don't want to say that toil doesn't exist. uh, Different organizations have seen different levels of toil, but ultimately it is the GRC team's responsibility to reduce the toil. I would say, when I say responsibility, in making sure one, uh, in making sure the business, the product teams understand why they're facing the toil. Like, let's just take examples because it's easier to talk through, right? Like if you're giving SLAs that every low vulnerability needs to be fixed within 15 or 30 days, right? Yeah, like they are going to get upset. Like you already have so many critical findings, you have certain things that needs to be fixed over a period of time, and you're expecting them to manually do all of this patching, manually fix this, provide updates. It distracts them from their innovation, from their deep thinking zone. So toil is real. So that's why, like, I don't think so it's just a GRC problem. Like I think so this is actually an example where the security and GRC team really need to work hand in hand. What is our governance expectations? What is our compliance expectation? How the security team can build, security engineering can build automated patching pipelines, can hyper prioritize what needs to be fixed versus not, like what is a reachable exploit versus not. Providing all of this context upfront and helping them understand like why we believe, like out of 10,000 that things that can go wrong, we are asking your headspace on these 5 6 things. So that's why engineering is needed within security. There is engineering needed within GRC. And uh, and I would say toil is a real problem for which security teams need to continuously think about. Then, because for a security team, their internal employees are their customers. So you can think of customers as your customers who pay you money, but in reality, your customers are also your internal employees, because you are building CI/CD SaaS tooling, you're building a lot of different capabilities within the places where they work. And if you keep on bombarding them with findings, keep on bombarding them with to dos, they're just going to not be engaged with you. Like, and it can be in multiple places. Like, it could be a training as well. Like, like my philosophy is, instead of making them sit through like 2 hours of training and then answer like 10 questions, I would rather focus them on asking meaningful questions, answer them think about what makes sense, and if they go wrong, train them. Like, let the answer help them think through like why this was incorrect. So there are different ways you can meet the intent. Like somebody might go with an approach that training means you need to pass 100%, right? That is the success of win. But in reality, if the mindset is changed, if people are thinking in the right way, they understand why they are wrong, it's still a win, right? So where am I going at is, uh, as a GRC practice, as a security engineering practice, we need to consistently think through what are the ways in how we can reduce the toil, how we can help them secure code by default instead of training them to write the code that doesn't have excesses at all. Of course, that's great, but if you can build the tools that can detect them, fix them, and provide the context timely, then yeah, like they will it'll create an enjoyable developer experience, right? Instead of just telling them, hey, you suck, you made this mistake, tell them like, hey, okay, this is actually a problem. Like I had this idea, but I've never implemented it any of the organizations. Like, instead of having secure code training per se, like of course you can have generic onboarding training when, as and when critical errors or misconfigurations take place, you can always have like a 2-minute video, or you can have a Google Doc that just explains like what can go wrong. Like, hey, this thing that you introduced, what is the ramification of it? What has happened in the wild because of these kind of things? Just train them as and when they are introducing misconfiguration, etc. Right? Is also something uh, to think of. Like, what is the right time to create awareness upfront during the time of performing the action, etc. So I would say a very long-winded answer to your question. Toil is a real problem. I don't think so any organizations have perfectly solved it, but it is definitely an important thing for GRC and security organization as a whole to contemplate and empathize on their
I
stakeholders.
love it. I love it. And I think you're absolutely right. So I think you're making a fantastic case of why GRC engineering is a real discipline, should be a real discipline, just like security engineering is a real discipline,
Yes.
right? The question then becomes, as a leader, how do you go about building a business case to build this GRC engineering? Because it takes time, money, effort, right, to go build this practice. And how do you convince your leadership teams that this is the investment that they should make?
Yeah, a loaded question. Uh,
Have you ever done that, or in your case, you never had you fortunately were not in a position where you had to go justify?
I think so. Everybody needs to justify. Like, you just can't. Of course, like, unless you're like a very lean, agile team where with a short, like, couple of employees, you are empowered to do that. And anytime you cross a 500, 600 size company, right? Like, you always end up. You need to justify every penny or every dollar that you invest. So I would say, one, to answer the question frankly, like, I'm fortunate that my leaders have place the trust in me, that I'm proposing, like, I'm not just randomly choosing the most awesome thing that, like, a marketing material that exists and just deploying it randomly. So they trust me that, like, whatever I'm recommending to procure or recommend to deploy or hire an engineer, they trust my instinct. It takes time to build that rapport, but ultimately everything needs to be justified. Like, in terms of GRC, right? Like, the number of hours, uh, like a simple example right now, I'm just working on something where I still feel my team spends significant amount of time in producing collateral, producing assurance material to meet the needs of our supply side of our business, the banks, our customers. So I need to be able to explain them that, hey, like, you see, with all the AI boom, etc., the amount of inquiries that are coming, like, we cannot expect somebody who has done their masters in cybersecurity to spend 4 months a year in responding to this question. So we need a method to this madness. We need to solve knowledge management as a problem. Like, knowledge management itself is a discipline. Like, how do we make great knowledge? You need to invest in knowledge management. The next is, how do you extract the knowledge management at speed, at scale, that can be consumed by different stakeholders? all of this sounds like a simple problem, but at scale, when you have like 30,000 stakeholders auditing you every year, it becomes a pain. So you need to hyper optimize knowledge management, so essentially what I'm trying to say is like you need to make the problem statement clear, the pain clear, the benefit clear, like, hey, faster deals, you're building trust at scale. So your storytelling needs to be very crisp, like why are we investing in a better knowledge management solution or an
Totally.
LLM access. So everything that you do, like within compliance, sales enablement, vendor management, or risk management, like if you're procuring tools, etc., all boils down to, at the end of the day, trust or dollars, right? So sometimes you can equate trust to beyond dollars as well. Like, of course, people will quantify trust with dollars, but I feel they're distinct. Like your brand equity, the trust, the relations that you build is very important with your customers. Like if our go to market team is building relationships with them, why not the security team? Like the security team needs to give them comfort that if you're partnering with us, you are actually partnering with a great organization who's thinking through this thing seriously. So the experience, etc. So you need to think through, like at least I look at in 3 dimension: risk reduction, trust, enablement, and security benefits, right? So you need to be able to
Risk reduction,
quantify.
trust, enablement, and security benefits, you said.
Yes,
Okay. And
you
where
can
is the
also take
engineer
the fourth.
style?
Yeah, there is fourth angle, which is dollars, which is very important. But luckily I have not been in a position right now where I need to justify everything based on dollars. Like I have optimized these on 3 principles, but the fourth principle is also dollars, because you can't you need to have a leverage, like why this particular investment is actually going to benefit us, going to will more sales deals, etc. There is a dollar component to everything, but I have been fortunate that I don't have to do that on a day-to-day basis
Got it.
for everything.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. What do you think is the current state of GRC tools today, Kenneth? You've been around this block quite some time. What do you
Hmm.
think is, where do you think we are with the tools today?
So again, we need to break it down by R and C. As I stated earlier, I really don't think so. The R spaces, with the boom of AI, with the boom of LLMs, with the boom of MCPs, etc., we are truly exploited. Exploited is not the right word, but we're not fully leveraged the power to make risk quantification, risk assessments efficient. So that I wouldn't say that risk management is a place where tooling has reached to a decent level of maturity. There are startups that are trying to disrupt this for a while, but it's ripe for disruption. My my assessment of the state of affairs of GRC tools. See, we do see a lot of organizations helping you collect and collect information in one place, but not necessarily analyze that information to clearly identify risky patterns or risk, right? So I feel like everybody has, I would, let me correct my statement. A lot of organizations or like startups have focused on collecting data and putting it in one place, right? The data collection piece they have solved really well, which is a big problem in its own, which is great. Like instead of us going in disparate systems, collecting data, normalizing the data in different formats and in a way that you can analyze it. So I believe that has been solved. But the next phase, like once you have collected the data, what do you do with it? How do you surface trends? How do you surface issues, etc.? I don't think so GRC or C tools are really great at it personally. That is the reason why I use both the strategies. Like I have compliance tools like GRC engineering tools that help me collect information at scale, help auditors come to this platform, review this information, and help them self-serve their audits, etc. So there are a lot of benefits, but I personally do think that for me, I need a lot more metadata. I need a lot more raw logs. I need to go to the source to understand what goes wrong. So we need to build a lot of internal dashboards, etc., on top of what traditional GRC tools provide. And I think so. There's nothing wrong in it. I don't expect every C tool to understand every organization needs. So GRC tools need to not overly rely on compliance automation tools, I would say, right? Like this server problem, they are really, they're getting better and better. I'm seeing tools where you can write if and then rules, right? If Workday is collecting this data, if Okta is having this data, you can write if and then rules and flag gaps. So it's definitely maturing, but in reality, the technology risks gaps, the fraud, the abuse, etc. that happens. You need to go to the source of your logs, understand the patterns, the trends, connect different data sources, right? Little so data skills are going to be more and more important in order to do true compliance, validation, and measurement. So I would say it's great. I'm not saying that the C, the compliance automation tools are not doing justice. They're solving a piece of a problem, and they're doing it. They're getting better and better and better at it. But there is still a lot more to be
Totally.
done.
Do
Yeah.
you see a world in which, just like you have all the financial companies, I'm sure Plaid has standing machine learning models, right, for financial transactions, for fraud and abuse. Do you see GRC teams, and particularly cybersecurity, from a risk perspective, writing our own models, machine learning models, uh, to evaluate risk or to quantify risk?
I'm not sure that we have. I'm at least I'm not seeing that in the industry as of now.
Okay.
Do I really want to? Um, I think so. The answer is still no, right? Like, again, you can't make your GRC team expert at everything. Like, you can't make them expert at machine learning models. Of course, there are abstractions like OpenAI allows you to uh, pull data, fine tune their models, etc. So there are certain level of things that, of course, the GRC team should be able to do. But there will always be advanced cases when it comes to your product fraud analytics, etc. I wouldn't want my GRC team to do that. We would have a dedicated fraud team, or like we will build capabilities within them so that they're fully up to speed of the developments, the product needs, etc. So there are places where I feel GRC team should be uh, able to do some lightweight capabilities in making their life easier. But for the higher stakes scenarios, I would still lean on our ML infrastructure team to build the things that we need.
Got it. Got it. And
Yeah.
do you think the current tooling infrastructure that you have, right, especially with third-party GRC tools, allow you to contextualize the data collection and the reporting and the visualization process?
No, I don't think so. Uh, Somebody might disagree with me, but at least my assertion as if you really want to render an opinion, I don't think so you're going to render an
Why do you think
opinion
that is so
based on
difficult? Why do you think that has been the case?
the truth. To be told is all the systems that I'm not talking about my organization per se, but this is my observation in general, right? When you go to audits, I don't think so you're exposing every core storage component, core infrastructure component, every AWS account.
Yeah.
Your auditors are not going to look at everything, right? They're going to get reasonable assurance, but we have to go beyond. The GRC team has to go beyond reasonable assurance. The depth, the breadth, the scope of systems, the scope of products
I
that we
see.
need to get involved is far beyond what traditional
Got
audits
it.
consume, right? So, like if like I don't know what is a good example. Like if it's a
But what I'm
circular,
hearing you say,
yeah,
Kenneth, and I think you're making an interesting point. I think what I'm inferring from what you're saying, part of the reason why we have not gotten there is because a lot of the GRC today has been very audit focused.
yes,
So your entire perspective has been, how do I pass an audit?
correct,
And you're just building enough to pass that audit.
yes,
Your point is that the GRC team, especially tech forward leaders like you, need a lot more than just passing an audit. That's a
yes,
function, yes, you have to do, but there is a
yes,
lot more you have to do before you get there. And your
yes,
point is that the tools have not focused from an assurance perspective as much as you would like to yet.
yes, that's
Got it.
correct.
I
Yeah.
think that's a phenomenally great point. What do you think, Kenneth, is the role of generative AI, large language models, and how they should be used within the GRC teams. Is there any directive that you have for your teams on how to use Claude or meaning Claude or
Yeah.
OpenAI or any of these tools?
Again, like I've been very fortunate. Plaid has been a very AI embracing organization. That what I mean to say it, like we're not randomly deploying AI everywhere, but we have the appetite to empower employees to be more effective at their roles. Um, and and that's true for my team as well, right? Like, so how I'm thinking about using generative AI, right? One is like we have engineers using Claude to write code. My team may not be writing code per se, but my team should know to answer like, hey, where are all the key storage systems? What has been configured? What has been logged? They need to be able to prompt and ask questions on top of our code base, right? So instead of going and asking our engineers like, hey, where do you send these logs for so and so components? My GSC team should be able to write the right prompt in Claude saying that this is my intention, this is what I want to validate, is this practice in place or not, can you go and validate this for me? And ability, and Claude actually does that really well. Like I am generally not in favor of talking about tools. There is another tool that I have personally POC, it's called unblock.ai. So like they're really great. Like you can really ask very specific questions. It can connect the dots between what's in a code, what is in an engineering docs, what has been discussed in a Slack, and summarize that we believe like this product feature does X, this capability is configured in this particular line. So instead of my team going and asking these questions, they're using this generative AI tools on top of uh, on built on top of the code to answer questions about how things have been configured. So again, toil, right? I'm not bugging engineers saying like, hey, tell me where is this configured. I have already discovered where it is. I believe this is configured or not configured. And then we go with all of the data. And when we speak to, so example one, next example of LLMs generally is report writing, right? Like okay, let me go to a very specific use case. If we can prompt LLMs to write or perform assessments in a particular manner, if we prompt it really well. So I'm really, I would like to, there are places where my team uses, but this is a place where a lot of other organizations can use in performing risk assessments and performing summarizing vendor risk reports, etc. So instead of spending a lot of time in doing report writing, etc., LLMs are really good at summarizing information. So there is a lot of scope over there. But the place that I'm truly excited is risk management. Imagine a world where you have a risk management framework that says that this is exactly how you render an opinion, high, medium, low. It could be fair, it could be a derivative of fair, whatever that works for you. You can train a custom model to perform assessments in a particular way. And just imagine this AI agent right now can talk to different tools. Like, hey, like if you're talking about backups, it can automatically scan through your engineering docs. What are the places backups are configured? It can look at, like, if there is a GitHub MCP, it can ask a question to the GitHub MCP. It can ask a question direct to Wiz. So I'm imagining a world where different AI agents can talk to each other and ask very smart questions to prompt each other's systems really well, get the information well, and summarize me that saying that like this is the scenario that you're worried about. I did A. I looked at what is happening outside the world, like all the threats, what are the breaches, like if you see S3 buckets have been compromised because they're misconfigured, etc. So it connects the dots. Like, hey, you have so many S3 buckets. You have so many S3 buckets with data. Like it asks all of this information in different places and just summarizes you that okay, I do believe this is actually a risk for a company like you. And just imagine the time save, right, for GRC teams. Generally, to perform one risk assessment, they would have spent like 3 weeks. They would have spoken to 10 engineers, logged into 5 different tools, run in different reports, and the analyst would have done this. LLMs are great at parsing information and doing this. So that's why I feel that the risk management space is ripe for
Got it.
disruption.
Do you think the behavior, especially from a GRC team's perspective, is the behavior changing from what I would call click ops, right? Clicking buttons, to more like chat ops, where you are actually more conversational and asking your Claude desktop or OpenAI Playground, any of those MCP host questions.
Yes.
Do you see that changing?
I do see changing. I do see that changing. Like, um, am I? I'm not saying that my team is 10 on 10 over here. We are moving in that direction, but I do feel that is the right direction to go, and I'm actively encouraging
And
my
why
team to
why
go
do
in
you
that
why do you
direction.
think that is the right direction to go?
Why do I think it's right direction? Because not everybody is expert at viz administration. Not everybody is expert
Exactly.
at like you like but you might you if you have a right risk mindset, you might know exactly what is the type of question you want to ask without really knowing which filter to click, which report to go, which
The
button to
mechanics.
click, etc. The mechanics, right? And um, and if that is abstracted, the speed, of course, like there needs to be an accuracy to this. You can't blindly trust the results, but I really would love to, like, I'm so impressed by how Claude can give the right insights about the code and how things have been configured purely from a GRC lens, not from a
Yep.
SWE
And I
lens.
think MCP is going a long way in making that ecosystem happen as well, right? Like you rightly
Yes.
pointed out. So absolutely. Now, uh, the other question I want to ask you is that one of the challenges is that these are probabilistic responses,
Hmm.
right? Audit, and I'm sorry to push you back into audit, but that's a real world sometimes you have to deal with.
Yes.
An audit is all about deterministic responses. You can't say this could have happened. You have to say either this has happened or this has not happened. How do you reconcile between what you are trying to do as a tech forward leader with your GRC teams with what you have to do to work with your internal and external auditors to
If you
demonstrate
don't,
reasonable
yeah, if you
assurance?
don't mind, Raj, can you rephrase that question? I'm just trying to
So
understand it better.
you have to, the auditors are looking for reasonable assurance and they are
Yes.
looking for a small subset, like you were saying.
Yeah.
And you are using these tools like Claude Desktop and your MCP host and a whole bunch of other things to be able to get to information faster and to be able to consume information faster.
Hmm.
But these are probabilistic
Correct.
responses as well. So you have to reconcile between these probabilistic responses that you're getting
Yes.
with the
So
deterministic responses that you have to provide to your auditors.
so that's why the risk management and compliance function is like the focus areas is different, right? So for me, like using all of this Claude and all of these things is really useful for the R function, right? For they have to connect the dots with the business goal, business objective, with the operational reality and what is happening outside my organization. So that concept works really well on the risk management world. Like, but again, for I don't see a time where I'm going to expose Claude interface to my
No, no.
audit firms.
Got it.
One, I still feel we will provide, like, I this is my understanding, we will still provide a much broader data set rather than just like 10 samples, 20 samples. I think so as and when um we get more and more mature, I think so organizations will feel comfortable exposing their larger uh, data set so that auditors can look at the entire population and render an opinion. I still don't think so anybody is doing this. No, audit firms are still taking an what I call a sample
Gotcha.
of all these things, right? But I believe if like if the GRC teams are taking actions, things can go wrong, right? Like I don't think so the goal of an audit is to say that like things will never go wrong, like you never had a problem, you never had a compliance gap. The goal is like when the compliance gap happened, you knew it, you fixed it before something really a real risk materialized, right? So as long as I feel the audit firm understands that like things can go wrong, but you fixed it immediately, you had means to correct it, detect it, and still render the right opinion, then that's the time where I'll be more comfortable exposing the entire data set so that they can look at it and tell us like, hey, like these are the three times uh, in the entire year, out of 30,000 events, three things did not go exactly how you had planned, right? But I can tell them for these three things, there wasn't corresponding action that we took, and we really didn't have a meaningful risk that materialized because of whatever just happened. So I really don't know whether audit firms even want to have these conversations, because it is more work for them. So they have limited amount of time. They want
Yeah.
to bill within the limited amount of time. So they looking at entire population is only going to make their work more. And But again, see, I have different opinions, right? Like, it's fine. Like, I'm not saying they're wrong, right? They have a time window. They have to do an assessment of the limited amount of to the best of ability. But the ball is in the GRC team's court, right? It is their job to look at things holistically, more depth. Like, if you're expecting auditors to do a more in-depth job than you, then yeah, like, you are failing as a GRC professional, right? So that's the reason it's great. Like, these tools can consume holistic data, and it allows GRC team to do potentially allows GRC team to uncover insights. But I still don't think audit firms are moving in a direction where they're
Got
going
it.
to look at the
But I
100% data set to render an opinion.
got it. But I like the way you're saying. I think the way that if I can rephrase it and correct me if I'm wrong, I think
Yeah,
you're saying this is they all are in a straight line, which is audit firms have to take a slice of the data and they do it at a very less periodicity, purely from the perspective of looking at compliance. And if compliance can collect all of the data, that you can choose which ones to present to auditors makes it faster. But because you're collecting all of the data, and if you can use these generative AI tools to provide better insights, then your risk falls in line. So ultimately, what you're basically saying is that your risk, compliance, and audit, they're actually just different facets of it, maybe different prisms through which you look at it, but the underlying data flow or the data stream is exactly the same. The more you do there, the better value you get in each of these.
correct. But with a slight caveat that the risk management program generally looks at so many different things, situations, scenarios, which you wouldn't typically look from a compliance angle.
Compliance.
Like, if you have just 10 things that you're looking for, the risk management program will suddenly be looking at scenario 40, scenario 80, scenario 90, new product being launched with X feature. So the 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 changes to which risk management team needs to adapt generally is significantly a little bit more. But again, if the risk management program can feed the compliance team that, like, there are thematic issues, the compliance team as part of their assessments can say that, like, hey, you are relying on these controls to determine the risk is low, but in reality it is not. So they need to be in talking terms, but each of them have their own
Perspectives.
focus areas and
Got it.
perspectives. Yeah.
I think we are approaching the end of the show, Kenneth. Then, and this is going to be my last question, right? Which is for the new grad who's coming out of college, right, or the few new person who's entering into this cybersecurity and GRC industry. What would you look for? What should they prepare with if they want to go get hired under in a GRC function and with a leader like you?
One is definitely they need to demonstrate that they have fundamental cybersecurity understanding for most of the roles. Again, I'm just taking the most important roles. Like, they have, I want somebody who has gone through that drill of understanding the different domains. They wouldn't know all the domains in depth, but they understand, like, why cryptography exists, why wh- like, they have been exposed to SAML, like some of this fundamental terminologies, etc. Right? I don't want them to hear first time when they're joining my organization, right? So uh, whatever they can learn in terms of key technology terminologies, concepts, etc., right? The familiarity. So having the familiarity either through their coursework or genuinely through their interest is generally a great signal for me. Somebody who has taken the time to understand different things like webhooks, etc. Right? Like these are the, again, I'm telling from a purely fresh grad perspective, right? So not all fresh grads will come from a engineering software engineering background, right? So for me, it is going to be important either through the self motivation, determination. They have taken additional coursework. They have take. How have they shown that they have gone beyond their comfort zone to learn something new? Is these are the things that I'm looking for. One, B is also the ability to reason, right? Like when I'm taking a little bit I'm flipping the game on the interview side right now. uh they need to be able to explain me the chain of thought, like what can go wrong, like when we put in a simple scenario, right? How would you react? They may not know the perfect answer, but how they think through, how they are essentially trying to break down the problem. For a new grad breaking into GRC, I would say that whatever opportunity you get to get into the cybersecurity realm, right? It can be anything. It could be detection. It could be anything. Just grab it, because eventually you need multiple different contexts. Little bit of pen testing, little bit of uh, software engineering, little bit of product security, etc. Right? Whatever different wide experiences and expertise you can get, just grab it. So that is after you get a job. So instead, if you can't directly get into the GRC, it is totally okay. Play around with different facets of cybersecurity, learn the breadth in whatever way possible. And the way I did it when I joined, I always had a curious mindset, like, hey, what are you working on? Like, why does this project even exist? Like, what is the role of a product security? So you need to have a great curious mindset even before you join. If your question is purely on coming right out of university, there are different ways, right? You can take coursework on ethical hacking. You can take coursework on basic generative AI. You can take, like, if you can show that, like, hey, I have little bit of decent breadth of concepts, then it makes me comfortable that this person is okay to learn diverse things quickly in a self-driven manner. What am I concluding is, one, if they can demonstrate that they've taken self-interest in learning different concepts within technology, they don't need to be cybersecurity purely related. That gives me a relatively confidence that they can learn, grasp, their motivation to learn things on their own. But ultimately, I really don't think there is a one perfect way to break into GRC. It is essentially, if you believe that you have good breadth, and if you are keen in expanding your breadth, then that's how you enter the GRC world.
Got it. No, I think this has been a very fascinating session. Kenneth, thanks for taking the time to spend with us and other listeners. Sincerely appreciate it.
Thanks, Raj. Thanks for having me on. Yeah.